Hi everyone. Since Ms. Baker decided she needed to go have a baby, I'll be doing your review videos for the next couple of months. So we're just going to go ahead and start with only the B's because your teacher should have done the A's in class. So with 1B, it says write the equation in slope-intercept form. So if you remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So when looking at a graph, the two things that we have to find are the slope, which is m, and our y-intercept, which is b. So our slope is the harder one to find here, but we're just going to pick any 2 points. And of course, we have to do rise over run for slope. So rise over run, from this point to this point, we're going to go up 1. So our rise is a positive 1. Then we're going to go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our run would be a positive 5. So remember, up and right are both positive, down and left are both negative. So our rise over run, or slope here, is 1 over 5. Now our B represents our y-intercept. And our M represented our slope. So our B represents the y-intercept, which is the point where it hits the y-axis. So if we look at our y-axis, this is the point where it hits the y-axis, which is -4. So our B value will just be -4. So now we're just going to use the equation, so y equals mx plus b. We're going to substitute in the m that we found and the b that we found. So our answer here would be y equals, our m is 1/5, so 1 over 5, x, don't forget the x here, and then -4. And this equation is your answer. For number 2, we're going to write an equation that can be used to find the nth term of the following sequence. So with sequences, we're going to use the formula a sub n equals d times n plus a sub 0. So remember that here, a sub n, that's like our y value, d is the common difference, n is like our x value, then a sub 0, that's going to be your 0 term. So in this problem, it has a sub 5 equals -9, a sub 6 equals -4, and a sub 7 equals 1. All this means is that our fifth term is going to be -9. Our sixth term is going to equal -4. And our seventh term is going to equal a positive 1. So now from this, we can look and find our common difference. So from -9 to -4, that would be +5. From -4 to positive 1 is also +5. So that means that our common difference here, so we're going to have a sub n equals, our common difference is a 5, so 5 n. So again, we can't forget that n. Now the next thing that we need to find is our 0 term. So we're going to have to go backwards all the way to our 0 term, which means we're going to have to find term 4, term 3, term 2, term 1, and term 0. So to go backwards, instead of adding 5, we're going to do the opposite, which is to subtract 5. So -9 minus 5 would be -14. -14 minus 5 would be -19. -19 minus 5 is -24. -24 minus 5 is -29. And then finally we reach our 0 term, which is what we want. So -29 minus 5 is -34. So our 0 term here is -34. And that is what's going to replace a sub 0. So we're going to put -34. And then that is our answer. So a sub n equals 5n minus 34. For number 3, we have to figure out which equations have a slope of 1/4. So we're going to circle all of them that apply, which means we can have more than one answer. So if we look at this first one, this one is in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So we need y equals mx plus b. Remember that our slope is represented with an m. So this equation, we need to figure out what m equals. Notice that the m is right in front of the x, which means that in this equation, the 1/4 would represent our m. So our slope in equation number 1 is 1/4, which is what we wanted, so 1 would be included in our answer. The next one starts out in standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. And notice that this one does not have an m, so we are going to have to convert it to slope-intercept form so we can figure out what m equals. So we're going to start with x minus 4y equals -12. So I need to get y by itself so it looks like this equation up here. So first I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So I have -4y equals -x minus 12. Then I need to divide by -4 to get y completely by itself. So those will cancel out, and we're left with y equals, since there's no number in front of this x, it would be like a 1. So we have -1 divided by -4, which would become a positive 1/4. Then we have the x. -12 divided by -4 is a positive 3, so plus 3. Now notice our m was the number right in front of the x, and again we have 1/4. So 2 also has a slope of 1/4. Now if we look at 3, this one is in point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So on this one, we need to figure out what our slope is. So the slope is the one right in front of your parentheses. So if we look right here, since the 4 is right in front of our parentheses, the 4 has to be the slope. And since 4 is not what we wanted our slope to be, we wanted it to be 1/4, we cannot include 3 in our answer. So our answer for this problem is 1 and 2. For 4b, we're supposed to rewrite the following linear equation from point-slope form to slope-intercept form. So this is already in point-slope form. So all we have to do is just go ahead and solve for y, then it will be in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. That's the form that we wanted to end up at. So for here, I'm going to take the 6 and distribute. So I have y minus 3 equals 6 times x is 6x, 6 times 7 is 42. Now y isn't by itself yet because we have y minus 3. So to get rid of that minus 3, I need to add 3 to both sides. So that cancels out, and I get y equals 6x plus 45. And that will be our answer. On number 5, we need to graph the equation 7y plus x equals 14. So we have two options here. First, we can solve for our x and y intercepts. And then second, we can go ahead and solve this for y to get it into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to start with the intercepts. So we're going to find our x-intercept first. So to find our x-intercept, that's when we replace the y with a 0. So I'm going to take this equation, but instead of a y, I'm going to write a 0. So 7 times 0 plus x equals 14. So if you're looking for your x-intercept, you replace your y with a 0. So 7 times 0 is 0, which does not affect our equation, so we can cross it out. So we're just left with x equals 14. But remember, we can't write intercepts as just x equals the number. We have to write it as a coordinate point, which is 14, 0. Now, when I made this, I forgot to make the graph go all the way to 14. So we're just going to estimate where 14 would be. So it'd be like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we're going to say it's about right here. And we're just going to put a mark that says 14. So the next thing we need to find is our y-intercept, which is basically the same steps, except we're going to replace x with 0 this time. So I have 7y plus, instead of an x, I put a 0, equals 14. So again, this 0 does not affect our equation at all, so we can just cross it out. So I have 7y equals 14. Then I just divide by 7, so I get y equals 2. When we write that as a coordinate point, we get 0 for our x, that's why we substituted a 0 here, and our y is a 2. So then we plot this point, 0, 2, and we have our 2 points. So this one was at 2. Now our last step is we just need to connect these with a line. So just draw a line between the two and put the arrows on the end. Now the other way that we can do this one is we can go ahead and solve this equation for y. So I'm going to start out with 7y plus x equals 14. So if we want this to be in slope-intercept form, we need to get y by itself. So to get rid of this x, I'm just going to subtract x from both sides. So I get 7y equals negative x plus 14. Then I have to divide by a 7. So my answer here would be y equals, remember there's a 1 in front of the x, so it'd be negative 1 over 7 x. Then 14 divided by 7 is plus 2. So our final answer here is negative 1/7 x plus 2. But then it wants us to graph it. So I need to know that my slope is negative 1 over 7, and my intercept is a positive 2. So to start off, I'm going to plot my intercept at positive 2. Then my slope is negative 1 over 7, so I'm going to go down 1 to the right 7. 3, 4, 5, 7. So it would be somewhere like right here. And again, we just have to connect our line. So this gives us the same line as we did when we found our intercepts. If we would have kept going again, we would have hit 14 as our x-intercept. So whichever way you choose to do it, you'll still get the same answer. (6b) is a word problem that it wants us to write in slope-intercept form. So it says you have a $30 gift card to Bahama Bucks. Each drink costs $2. Write an equation in slope-intercept form where D represents the number of drinks and R represents the remaining amount of the gift card. So normally slope-intercept form looks like y equals mx plus b. But in this problem, they give us different variables, so we have to use those. So D represents the number of drinks, so that's going to be in place of x. And R represents the amount on the gift card, which would be our y. So instead of y equals mx plus b, our equation is going to look like R equals m times D plus b. Now for the slope, we have to look for these words. So it would be each, every, and per. So if we look at our problem, notice it says each drink costs $2. So if each drink costs $2, we do not get paid to buy a drink, so we have to spend our own money. So that would mean that our slope would be a -2. So since we are not getting money to buy a drink, we have to give it up. That's why it's a negative. Now your intercept is going to be the amount that you start with. So notice it says we started with $30, so our intercept is 30. So now all we have to do is plug it in to this formula right here. So our end equation will be R equals, instead of M, we have -2. Then we have D. Oops. And then our B value is a +30, so +30. So this is the equation. All right, now we're going to go to 7A and 7B. So both of these are very important, so we're going to go over both of them. So notice on this one we have a horizontal line. So if we do our trick, the horizontal lines make a Z, which means it's a 0 slope. So in this one, our slope equals 0. And then we have y equals mx plus b is supposed to be our equation. Notice our y-intercept here is a 4. So we're going to have y equals 0x plus 4. But since 0x just becomes a 0, we don't need to worry about that. So our final equation is y equals 4. So anytime you have a 0 slope, your equation is always going to look like y equals some number. So you will not even have an x in your equation. Now for 7b, we have a vertical line. So if we draw two vertical lines, we can make a u out of them, meaning undefined. So the slope for this one will be undefined. Now, anytime we have an undefined line, our equation should look like x equals some number. So if we look at our graph, notice that every point has an x value of -3. So x equals -3 would be our equation. And these are just two things you kind of have to just memorize. All right, 8b says use the table to find the following. So we need to find our x-intercept, our y-intercept, and our equation in slope-intercept form. So our x-intercept, if you remember, was a number, and our y was 0. So we have to look at our table to see where does y equal 0. So if you look, we have y equals 0 right here. That means this will be our x-intercept. So our x value is a 7, and our y value is a 0 like it should be. So 7, 0 is our x-intercept. Now our y-intercept, the x has to be a 0, and the y is a number. So if we go where x equals 0, the y equals a -3. So 0, -3 is our y-intercept. Now the last thing we have to find is the equation in slope-intercept form. So we already have our y-intercept, so we know b equals whatever your y-intercept is, which is -3. But the other thing we have to find is m. So m is change in y over change in x for tables. So from -3 to 0, that's +3. From 0 to 3, it's +3. 3 to 6, +3. And 6 to 9 is +3. From 0 to 7, it's +7. 7 to 14 is +7. 14 to 21 is +7. 21 to 28 is +7. So we know that our change in y values is +3. And our change in x values is +7. So that means our slope is 3 over 7. So now we can write this in slope-intercept form, which was y equals mx plus b. So y equals, our m is 3 over 7. Then we have x. And our b value is a negative 3, so minus 3. So there we have our x-intercept, our y-intercept, in our equation. So number 9 says, write the equation of the line in point-slope form from the point negative 3, 4. So remember, point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we need a point and we need a slope for point-slope form. Notice the problem gives us this point, negative 3, 4. So x, y will be negative 3, 4. So we can go ahead and label this one as x1, and the 4 will be y1. Now the other thing we need for point-slope form is the slope. So from this table here, or this graph, so we pick any 2 points, so I'll pick this one and this one. Now from this point, we have to go down 1, so our rise would be a negative 1. And we have to go to the right 3, so our run would be a positive 3. So that just means that our slope is negative 1 over 3. So now we just have to put it in this equation. So I have y minus, my y1 is a positive 4, so y minus 4 equals my m value, which is negative 1 over 3, times x minus, my x1 value is negative 3, so minus negative 3. So now, I can't leave this as minus and negative. We have to change that into a positive. So minus and negative becomes a positive. So my final equation is y minus 4 equals negative 1/3 times x minus a negative becomes plus 3. And that is our final equation. For number 10, it wants us to write the equation in point-slope form from a table. So we're going to use our same equation. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So first off, I need a point, and I need a slope. So slope of a table is change in y over change in x. So my change in y from negative 16 to negative 6 is plus 10. From negative 6 to 4 is plus 10. From 4 to 14 is plus 10. From negative 1 to 1, it's plus 2. From 1 to 3, it's plus 2. And from 3 to 5, it's plus 2. So that just means our change in y is a positive 10. Our change in x is a positive 2. And if we simplify that, we get a slope of 5. Now for our point, we can pick any of these 4 points. So I have negative 1 and 16, 1 and negative 6, 3 and 4, or 5 and 14. At this point, it does not matter which point you want to pick. You can just pick any of these 4 that you want to choose, as long as they're in the same row. So I'm going to pick 1, negative 6. And now I just substitute everything into this equation. So I have x1, y1, and then my slope is 5. So I would have y minus, my y1 is negative 6, so minus negative 6 equals, my slope is 5, then x minus 1. So minus a negative again becomes plus, so y plus 6 equals 5 times x minus 1. So that right there is the equation we need in point-slope form. For number 11, we're just finding our x and our y-intercept. So our x-intercept, that's where it hits the x-axis. So if we look at our x-axis, it hits right at this point where the x value is 5. So our x-intercept would be 5, comma, and remember our y is 0. Now if we look at our y-axis, that's where we find our y-intercept. So my y-intercept will be right here. Notice the y value is -3. So 0, comma, -3. And that's all you have to do for 11b. So 12b wants us to find the x and the y-intercept, but we don't have a graph this time. So we're going to do like what we did on one further up. So we're going to start with our x-intercept. And remember, your x-intercept is where you replace the y with a 0. So I have 5x plus 2 times 0 equals 20. We don't need that, so we can just cross it out. So 5x equals 20. We can just divide by a 5, which would mean x equals 4. But don't forget you have to write it as a coordinate point. So our x value is 4. And since we plugged in a 0 for y, our y value is 0. Now for our y-intercept, we basically do the same thing, except we're going to replace x with 0. So I have 5 times 0 plus 2y equals 20. 5 times 0 cancels out. So I get 2y equals 20. Then I divide by 2. So y equals 10. So our point here is 0, comma 10. And our last question, we have 13b. So this one says, write the equation of a line with a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of -8. So we're going to use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So the two things we need are m and b. Notice this question tells you the slope is 3. So since m represents our slope, we know m equals 3. And then it tells us a y-intercept of -8, which means our b equals -8. So all you have to do for this question is just substitute these into our equation. So I have y equals 3x, since our m is 3, and our b is -8, so -8. And that's the answer. So that will go ahead and just finish the review. And yeah, we're done.